The three of them turned around, and Henry reached out and took the seal, which was still knotted in yarn. "Did you get this from the dead body by the river?" "Dead body?" Timothy said, startled. I nodded. "It was Richard. I think he must have tried to hide in the banks. There was no one to tell him how treacherous the mud could be." "Poor, stupid Richard," Timothy said. I nodded. "No one deserves to die alone like that. Not Richard, not anyone." "He wasn't the first to die for this thing," Henry said, weighing the seal solemnly in his hands. "But I hope, at least in my lifetime, he'll be the last." "May I see it?" Trey asked reverently. Henry held it up, but did not hand it over. "Is that it?" Trey asked. "It looks like a giant lug nut." Timothy reached over and whacked Trey on the back of the head, but not in the hard way that George had hit Henry. Lisbette didn't go risking her life for a lug nut tonight. Trey rubbed his head. "I was just saying what it looked like." "Get upstairs with you," Timothy ordered. "The sooner Father knows you're safe, the better." Henry put his arm under Trey's shoulder and helped him across the cellar floor to the stairs on the other side of the room. Timothy turned around and closed the tunnel door, which was stacked in front with actual shelves of wine. He waited until the boys were nearly out of sight and then asked, "Honestly now, where were you hiding that thing?" "I tied it from my corset," I whispered, not wanting to shock any young ears that might still be close enough to hear. "It's been knocking about against my legs for the past hour or two. I lifted my skirts, just high enough to inspect the damage. It was worse than I'd expected. The stockings were torn to shreds, and layered atop the bruises were several gouges where the skin had broken. Dried rivulets of blood traced down my leg. I quickly dropped my skirts again, but not before Timothy had seen it. He dropped down to his knees and started examining my legs. In any other circumstances, I should have been highly scandalized. But his fingers were so tender and the concern on his face so real that I could hardly accuse him of anything indecent. "Lisbette," he whispered, his fingers tracing around the bruises. "It can't be worse than this," I said, brushing the skin near the bruise on his head with my fingertips. He lifted his face to me. "Did you have the seal when we were running through the woods?" "I did try to tell you, only I got distracted by the kiss." He stood up and took the candle. In a voice devoid of emotion, he said, "I shouldn't have done that." I watched him helplessly. What were the right words to tell him that what he had done was the only thing I'd wanted him to do since I got back to Easton? And how could I tell him that I wanted him to do it again? "Do you need help walking?" he asked, gesturing with the candle to the stairs. "No, but—" He waited. I felt myself getting hot between the ears. "You listen to me, Timothy Robert Easton. When you first kissed me, I was a 13-year-old child. What did you expect me to say? What in the world did I know about love then? But when you kissed me tonight, well, you made me forget everything and everyone, including the first time. And then before I could figure out what you were talking about, you were gone chasing after Henry. If you'd stayed long enough for my head to clear, I would have told you that—" It was then that something painful rose to the surface of my memory. I gasped, "Oh, Timothy." "What? This is disastrous." His eyebrows creased together. "I did something horrible," I stammered. "What did you do?" I swallowed. "It was signed and witnessed tonight." "Lisbette, what are you talking about?" I felt myself plunging back into the nightmare. "I signed a betrothal contract with Tory Burnside." No longer able to look him in the eye, I began to talk very fast. "On the ride home last night, I told Uncle William about the money. It was horrible, more horrible than I even could have imagined. But then he and Lawrence must have started plotting as soon as we got home because they came up with this plan for me to make it all right. You see, Tory agreed to pay all the taxes in return for me signing the contract." I chanced a quick glance up into his face. My worst fears were confirmed. He was red with fury. "You'd let Tory Burnside pay your taxes, but not me?" "Hush," I said, looking furtively toward the stairs. "Not so loud. It was only because Uncle William threatened to throw Jane and me out and take Mother and Aunt to Michaelton." "He did what?" "Mother's been ill, and I was sick with worry, and—" This was ridiculous. Why was I defending myself? I straightened my back and began smoothing my bodice. "And the last thing you said to me was to go marry the next man I saw." He gripped my shoulders and stooped so that he could look me in the eye. "Do you want to marry Tory? Not in a million years." "Do you love him?" "It is impossible even to think about that." "Then his contract isn't legitimate." "But I signed it." "It's void as long as our contract is still valid." "But everyone is saying it isn't. They say because you're a felon that our betrothal is void." "But I'm not a felon." "Well, I know that, but—" "So what you signed is worthless." I paused to think about this, but they'll only ask me to do it again after the contract ends. "We'll see about that," he said. My heart missed a beat. "We will?" "Yes, because once I pay the taxes, then your Uncle William will have no more reason to force Tory on you." For a moment I was too crestfallen to speak, but only for a moment. "You are the most hard-headed country lout I ever knew." "And you're the proudest hothead that was ever born in Easton." "I will not marry you for your money." "So you've said. Don't forget, I never ask you to. But I would pay your uncle twice the sum he asks, if only to prevent you or any of your sisters from ever marrying Tory Burnside, which I am allowed to do without your permission. So get off your high horse and follow me upstairs." "Why are we going upstairs?" To bandage your legs, Goatbrain. I'm not letting you or anyone else bandage me tonight. I'm going home. In one swift movement, I suddenly found myself swept off my feet and into Timothy's arms. He marched up the stairs, glowering and muttering under his breath. Tory Burnside, he said, of all the stupid messes to get into, Lisbette. But you said it wasn't legal, I reminded him softly. It's not, but I despise the thought of you letting him go around spreading word to everyone that you two are engaged. We arrived in the kitchen where the sleepy scullery maid was boiling water. Our unceremonious entrance caused her quite a scare, but Timothy paid no attention and continued to carry me up the next staircase and through the swinging door that led into the main house. Timothy, I said, put me down at once. How can you disgrace me like this? Tory Burnside, indeed. We were approaching the morning room where the candles were lit, and I could hear his parents' voices along with Henry and Trey. I beat his shoulder with my fist. Quickly put me down, I whispered fiercely. What will everyone think of this? But I only walked right into the room. Trey was in a place of honor on the couch, surrounded by his parents and Henry. James, the chief groom from the stables, was there too, deftly wrapping up Trey's ankle in the same manner he did for young colts. In his piping voice, Trey said, Oh, look, here's Lisbette. Lisbette, look, Father's just come in too. His parents, who had been monitoring James's work, were quite speechless at the sight of us. James glanced up, but promptly dropped his well-trained eyes and continued wrapping Trey's ankle as if spectacles like this happened every day at Steedsley. Dash it, Timothy, I whispered, but it did no good because it was his bad ear. Lisbette's hurt, Timothy announced. James, can you attend to her as well? Certainly, sir, he said, pausing to look at me again, but surely not another sprained ankle. He dropped me in the settee opposite Trey. She's managed to bash her shins to a proper mess. Lady Caroline looked at my filthy dress and wild hair. My poor dear, what happened to you, and how did you injure your shins? But I had to stop to think how to answer properly in front of the other men. It was one thing to mention your corset to your betrothed, but quite another to a more general company. You might say she stumbled over a bad contract, Timothy said, and without another word he stalked out of the room, leaving me to try to clear the awkward silence that followed. Sir John Robert escorted me home. Lady Caroline had argued that I should stay the night and not be allowed to go, but I stubbornly insisted. Besides, after the alarming news about Thomas was shared, Sir John Robert had already ordered the carriage, so I said that I might just as well be taken home. We no sooner got on our way when Sir John Robert shook his head at me and said, This is a bad business. Tory Burnside is a rotten egg through and through. What else can be done? I asked in my defense. Back at the house I'd given a brief explanation concerning the lost money, but somehow Sir John Robert hadn't seemed to understand the problem yet. I lost the money, so it's my job to fix the damage. But it's beyond comprehension why you should choose Tory over Timothy. It is not beyond comprehension, I argued hotly. Timothy's name was joined to mine when I was less than 2 years old. I had no say in it, but Tory was an option, however horrid, that I was allowed to make on my own. If I am proud, then it's the kind of pride that permits me to turn down money from a respectable man for a contract he never made, and to accept a despicable man who specifically sought the contract out. He was silent for a moment and sighed, but then he thumped his cane on the floor of the carriage and said, But hang it, Lisbette, can't you at least come to me before you go making rash decisions? In your father's absence, I think you owed it to me, at least to apply for my advice. I reached out and touched his hand. I wanted to come to you with the whole matter, but, well, you must admit that you've got your hands rather full at the moment. How could I drop my problems in your lap when you were already batting off the King's Guard from your doorstep? He shook his head. It is a pack of burrs in my boots, but it shall soon be over. But you, my dear, you I can always make time for and ever shall. Even, he had to pause to clear his throat, he continued roughly, even if you do prefer a lout to my son. There was no comforting him, and by the time we got to Brindlelock, I had the unpleasant experience of seeing him wiping his eyes with his handkerchief.